I'm Katrina from KatrinaKCreations.com, where I teach curvy women how to sew for their curves. Today, I'm going to show you how to sew a flounce to a skirt, and this flounce goes to a point at the center front. If you haven't seen my previous videos about adding a flounce to a skirt, I've put the links to those videos in the description below. Keep in mind, though, that a flounce does not have to go to a point at the center front. That's just the way I designed this particular flounce. I've sewn and pressed the side seams of the flounce. This, of course, is not my good fabric. This is just something that I'm using to do this video. This is the unbleached cotton muslin. And then I just have the bottom portion of my skirt where the flounce will be attached. And I'm using a different color so that when I'm sewing, you'll know exactly which one is the skirt and which one is the flounce. I've also sewn and pressed the skirt portion at the side seams. I've also sewn a machine basting stitch around the area of the point on both the flounce and the skirt. I've turned the flounce over to the wrong side, and as you can see, I marked the wrong side of the flounce before I removed the pattern piece. And I use that marking as a guide for my stitching. I sewed right next to the line within the seam allowance. And I'm hoping that when I attach the flounce to the skirt, that none of this stitching will show, and then I won't have to take it out. I don't know if that's going to work, but we'll see. I've turned the skirt part on the wrong side as well. And I want you to see I did the same thing. Within the seam allowance, I sewed right next to the marking. And if you want to just add reinforcements, you can also sew another stitch, basting stitch, right next to this original stitch in the point area. And I probably will do that when I actually sew my good fabric, but today I'm going to see how it works without it. So on the skirt, I'm going to carefully clip to the point. Handling this with care, I'm going to pin the flounce to the skirt. Again, the skirt is yellow, the flounce is unbleached cotton. I want to sew with my skirt portion on top. So with the right sides together, I'm going to pin my flounce to my skirt, first starting at the side seams. Once the side seams are pinned, I'm going to go and pin across the back. Because my flounce does not have a center back seam, I have a notch marking where the center back is. And I'm just going to match that to the center back of my skirt. Then I'm going to finish pinning the rest of the back. Once the back is completely pinned, I'm going to pin one side of the front. I'm always adjusting and readjusting pins. And I have notches on both the front and back just to match them up to the skirt. And when I get to the front, this section, I'm only going to pin to the point. I'm not going to pin the other side yet. And I'm just matching my point to point, and sticking a pin there, and then I'll pin the rest. Okay, and now I'm ready to start sewing. So I've pinned the side from side seam to side seam across the back, and also one side of the front. And then I'll pin the rest of this once all of this is sewn. So now we can go to the sewing machine. The same way I pinned the flounce to the skirt, I'm going to also sew it that way as well. So I'm starting at the side seam, going all the way across the back. Then I'll continue to sew one side of the front until I get to the point at the center of the flounce. Now I'm getting closer to my point, and I'm just trying to smooth this out because I don't want to crease at my point. So let's see how this goes. Then I'm going to carefully sew to the point, and I think I'm there. So I'm going to then remove this pin. Now I'm going to lift up my presser foot and turn this way. I'm going to do my best to pin this while it's still under the machine. I'm going to lower this presser foot, and then I'm going to finish pinning the other side of the front. One thing I did forget to mention and to do is where we sewed our basting stitch around the curved area of our flounce, we also need to clip the seam allowance in that area, not only for this side of the flounce, but when we pin the first side as well. And now I'm going to continue to sew the other side of the front. Constantly have to smooth it out to make sure you don't get any puckers. Now the flounce is sewn, and I am going to have to take out some stitching, but that's fine. So now I need to trim it and I need to press it. But before I press it, I'm going to take out the basting stitches that are showing. Now that I've taken my stitching out, I'm going to trim it and press it. I got a little stain here, so just ignore that. This is not my good skirt, so it's okay. One of the things that I do want to point out that I forgot to mention earlier in the video, so in the beginning when you do your basting stitch, you probably want to start back further because you're going to have to clip within this curve. I always forget that. Hopefully when I sew my good skirt, I'll remember to clip the seams. So now I'm just going to trim it, and of course if you're doing you're sewing your good skirt, you can just do this part when you serge or finish your seam. I want to make sure that I don't cut the skirt or the flounce, and you're just going to trim it all the way around, front and back. Once your seam is all trimmed, you're going to press it up toward the skirt. So my seam allowance is pressed toward my skirt, and this is how it looks once it is pressed. And that concludes this video where I showed you how to sew a flounce to a skirt that comes to a point at the center front. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. Did you like this video? I'd appreciate you giving it a thumbs up. Don't forget, you can also find me over at KatrinaKCreations.com, and thank you for watching.